Hi, this is Brenda Abrian, and welcome to Working with Graphite. It's a short video pretty much on the topic. I'm under 15 minutes, so it's pretty short. And I just wanted to cover sketching with graphite and what tools I use, and that's what this video is about. On the screen, you're going to see me messing around with some pencils and some blending tools and such for working with graphite. I have two favorite pencils that I use, and they are Prismacolor H and Prismacolor 2B. And I have three Graphene sketching pencils as well in darker, softer graphites 7B, 8B, and 4B. My blending tools, and my favorite blending tool there I just had in my hand, was the cotton swab. I also like to blend with the rolled paper stumps, and I like to use medium bristle paintbrushes and sometimes even coarse bristle paintbrushes to blend or remove graphite from areas on my drawing. Right now what you see is me sketching out the rough design for where I want to put my first focal point and the primary focal point of the drawing. And it is an imaginary flower that kind of looks like a sunflower, but not really, because if you pay attention when we get to the end, there's no sunflower seeds in the center of this. It's kind of Gerber daisy, sunflower, quasi. I'm making it up as I go because the drawing isn't about flowers, it's about graphite. And I just happen to pick flowers to sketch with. And this one's just coming out of my head, so it's kind of a morphed version of a couple flowers squished together, I think. So don't try to quote me on what kind of flower it is, because it's just one I made up. What I'm doing right now is using the H pencil, and this is a time-lapse drawing that I'm voicing over, because you'd be here for 2 hours watching me draw this entire page if I didn't time-lapse it. And so that's why my hand's moving so fast. Nope, I can't shade that fast. But we're doing the lightest shading first with the H because it's the hardest lead and it's the easiest with low pressure to produce a light shade that stays pretty even and doesn't show lots of individual lines. And then I came back, and you can see me using it now, using the darker leads. This one particularly is one of the Graphene Sketchers, and I think it's a 7B, which is pretty dark. But just above it, you see shadows that I put in those first layer of petals, and those shadows were done with the 2B. And those are the two pencils I use most prominently, are the H, the hard lead, and the 2B for shadow. And now I'm blending with my cotton swab. I like to use a cotton swab for a lot of reasons. One of the really good ones is it's really cost effective and I can just throw it away. And two, because it creates a really nice blend without creating any shine. Sometimes if you use maybe substandard lead or you just press too hard with the rolled paper stump, you end up with a bit of a shine on areas you're trying to blend with the darker graphites. So I use those sparingly and use the swab more often than anything. And the second thing that I use, the paintbrush, I'm going to use in a minute when we get to the center of this flower. And I use that because it blends like a light blend. And I don't mean like light color, I mean like light weight. It doesn't move too much of the graphite around, but just enough to make lines blurred that you want to be blurred. So that's why I use it. Here I'm using a darker one of the graphites. I think this one's the 7B, could be the 4B too. But it's there because the very center of this flower, in my mind, is almost black, like a sunflower can be, or like a Lazy Susan or a Black-Eyed Susan, kind of a daisy thing, mum, I don't know what those are. And then the light is just hitting a few of the little center pedestals, if that's what you call them, the center bits that put off the pollen. Not a botanist, I just know that the light's hitting it there. So anyways, I'm using now an electric eraser to take away some of that graphite and leave really fine, clean areas for highlights, and they work really well on the petals. Briefly in the middle there when I was talking, you saw me use a white charcoal pencil to put a little bit of medium light on the end of some petals that are facing the sunlight in this picture. Now, what I'm doing now is cleaning up my own mess. I forgot to put down a piece of fabric to stop me from smudging my drawing, and I just figured it out when I got to floral focal botanical element number 2, these 3 daisies, and I got smart and got my piece of fabric and stopped myself from smearing my graphite everywhere. I don't use tissue or wax paper or parchment paper like some people use, because it still has a texture and it tends to slide when you move your wrist across the paper, so it still does do some smudging. This little, I think it's like quilting cotton fabric square, it just doesn't move, so it still does the job, but you have to pick it up and move it. Don't slide it or drag it to the next location as your drawing grows, but it really does the job in a much better way, in my opinion, because it doesn't slide around and create little smudges under the area where you've laid it there to retard that smudging. So here we go on these flowers. Again, this is the swab technique, and I'm using the swab mostly to put the graphite, moving the graphite from the outside edges to create the center of this flower. And I'm drawing the detail for the first time with the 2B here, because these are a dark centered flower as well. They're in my neighbor's yard. They're right next to my fence. I don't know what they're called, but they're really pretty. They are not the black-eyed Susan, because I think they don't have, the black-eyed Susan doesn't have that like really globe or big round center. And these are a purple or magenta almost color on the petals with that dark center, and they're beautiful. They're very big and they stand really tall, because they're taller than my probably 4.5 foot or 5 foot fence. So I really like those, and I decided to put some in this drawing. The last one of these types of mums or daisies, I'm not sure which they are, that I'm drawing here is facing directly at the light. You'll notice that I use my electric eraser almost primarily to completely put those light areas and depict the center petals or portions of the center of this flower. You can use the electric eraser for a lot of things, and if you draw animals or people or things with fur or feathers, and you're trying to put in highlights or hair separation or clear away really fine small areas after they've been accidentally smudged over, the electric eraser is invaluable, and they're so inexpensive. They didn't used to be, but they are now. And mine has 2 sizes of the little eraser nibs. It has a larger surface one and a really small one for fine detail. It's awesome. I just recommend them highly. But I wouldn't give up my kneadable eraser or my white rubber eraser either, because they have different purposes basically. So to me, those 3 erasers are essential for a drawing. And even if you're just using the drawing for the base of a painting, they really help you keep your paper clean and do it in the way you want. And the electric eraser is really more of an artistic tool to me than it is a straight up eraser. This is another focal point that is floral. It's a little white vine that I think I'm drawing at about 200% the size of the actual flower, but it's easier to draw at that size because they're little. It's a little white vine that is in my neighbor's yard that has a great sweet smell to it. And yes, I do have flowers in my yard, but my yard, we just bought the house about a year ago, and it didn't have many living flowers in it. Had plenty of grass and trees, but didn't have a lot of flowers in it. And we just put some in last summer, so ours are just now coming to the place where they're really flowering, and this spring should be nice. But last year, I was paying attention to my neighbor's flowers more than ours. So this little white vine, again, just caught my attention, and I thought it would be kind of fun to put it in the white space, because I have a white space paper problem. Every time I paint or draw, if there's open white space, I have trouble leaving it there, always trying to put something in it. And here I go again. White space at the bottom of this page requires another flower. So this is a peony, one of my favorite flowers ever, and I'm not having anything to refer to in the neighbor's yard for this one. I just am doing this from my head because it's one of my favorite flowers, so I draw it a lot. And it's just a really whimsical, lovely flower. And again, it works out perfectly to use those two main graphite pencils, the H and the 2B, because there's a lot of contrast in the Peony. It has very curved petals, so the bottom of the petals tend to be drastically more shadowed than the tops. So they always look like they're highlighted magically or photography editing, but it's really just the shape of that petal, which is so rounded and cupped, and makes that flower really probably more of a romantic shape than if it had flatter petals like a lot of other flowers do. So again, this is the 2B and the H, and then I'm using my kneadable eraser also on this one to take away some of the graphite and leave some softer highlights on those petals that are in the back of this flower. Next, we're going to move to another botanical, and it'll be the last one in the drawing. And I'm doing that now, and I'm putting in a cactus. And I'm doing that because I was challenging myself to draw the thorns on the cactus, if you call them thorns. And I wasn't sure how to do it at first, but guess what? Electric eraser came in pretty handy. I just drew the petals, or paddles, or whatever you call the branches on a cactus, and then I erased away where the thorns were over the cactus, and then added some shadows for the ones that were reaching beyond the edge of the cactus. So that I added the graphite for that. Now, here comes the completely illogical giraffe pattern. I don't know why I decided to put a giraffe pattern, but it made sense to me at the time. And this is a new graphite. This is the water-soluble graphite. I do not have the brand name for this one. It was a pretty inexpensive set of 3, but when I threw away the package, they weren't smart enough to print it on the paper. So on the pencil, I do not know what the name is. It's so easy to use, but I warn you, if you haven't used it before, don't use it in place of a pencil if you can't find another pencil. It's not as good as regular graphite for straight up drawing, and it doesn't erase once it dries from getting wet. You make it permanent, it turns like paint. So you better put water-soluble graphite where you want it once you get it wet. And that's really my painting for today, and thank you for watching.